tortillas, but sure.
Yeah, so I can't remember the name of the bread, but they use that bread for like everything. It's just generally a utensil as much as it is a food. And apparently the Aztecs used to do that with tortillas, and I would guess Mesoamericans as a whole. So Dave points out quite rightly that you can't really say what they were eating were tacos, even though they might have even been putting stuff in these tortillas, in the way that you couldn't say that, whatever you were eating was a sandwich because there was a loaf of bread on the table or a basket of rolls on the table, in the exact same way that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember when I lived in Yuma 25 years ago, and I went to Algodones right over the border for the first time, and I saw the local Mexican population with these big plates of like stewed meat, and they had the tortillas, and I was like, oh, they're gonna assemble that to a taco, but no, they ripped it up and they would just use it to grab the meat and put it in their mouth, and I thought that's when the lights kind of went off. And I still love the traditional taco too, but I also love to just put the stuff
Head west towards South Holden Road.
on my plate and use it as a spoon or a grabber.
Sure. It's like, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a kind of sushi, it's almost like deconstructed sushi, where they don't bother to turn it into a roll. It's just a bed of rice, and then they put all the stuff you would put in the sushi just on top of the rice. It's technically not sushi, even though all of the elements are there.
Yeah, and I do the same thing with Indian food with the garlic naan.
Yes. Which, again, is another one of my favorite cuisines, too. Like, Indian food, oh my god.
Do you eat Indian mixture?
I love, like, all food. Yumi's always saying, she's like, it doesn't really matter whenever you talk about how great a food is, because you think all food is good. And it's true. Like, I love just about all food. There's really not a food that I'm like, I don't like that wholesale,
Yeah, I know. One of my favorite hobbies is eating
Continue on South Holden Road for 1 mile.
foods. It's so
Here.
good. So the taco, though, back then, like you said, they were using these tortillas as spoons and such like that. And it was about the late 1800s that sort of the Mexican taco that we're familiar with finally kind of comes on the scene.
So, the word taco is kind of up for debate, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, taco was a word in Spain, hundreds of years ago.
I wonder
but it
what
didn't mean the food. It was,
you gotta get in that
a lot of
Facebook
different
group. I need
things, but
some.
one of the things it meant was
You
going to come into
understand.
play with
I don't know.
the
What
food
they
was,
even
it was
post
like a
as
plug
In a quarter mile, turn right onto
Look at this guy.
or a tag stuffed into the barrel of a musket to keep that ball
That to
settled.
me,
It also was like
Somebody
a
else
shot
in
of
your
wine or
No
a
one
hammer
myself
or
in that.
a billiard cue, you could call a taco. But at the time, none of those words had anything to do with the food.
And I don't think any of them means
No.
Facebook.
So the word taco
Right.
predates the food taco. That seems to be the clear
no reason
the
to
clear
recommend it to
aspect of
anyone.
it, the clear upshot, as I would say.
Yes.
There's also a rival to the Spanish word taco, T-A-C-O, and that's a Nahuatl word taco with an L in there, basically. T-L-A-H-C-O. And it apparently means middle or half. And from everything I've seen, that is
Take the next right onto Van Story Street.
incorrect etymology for the word taco as we understand it today. But it's just total coincidence.
Right, but you might see some people claiming that, correct?
Yes, but they are wrong.
Continue on Van Story Street for 3/4 of a mile.
That's right. So to get from the musket
but she's
plug
going. They were pretty
to
slow
the
in there.
food,
It was the only order they
in
had.
Pilcher's books, he makes
Yeah.
Yeah.
a guess that a surmise that other people have also made. That sounds pretty good to me.
You scared me.
With the story in Hidalgo, it was a silver mining town, Real del Monte specifically.
You pulled it up just as that car was
And
going there. I felt
what the
trapped.
guys in the mine would do is they would work, and their sometimes daughters and wives would bring them their lunch, which was something a lot like a taco, like beans or that stewed meat or maybe some avocado wrapped in a tortilla. And they would put it in a towel-lined basket where they get all nice and steamy and bring it down there for lunch. So while they're working in the mine, they're blasting holes in the rock, which they do by carving out a hole and then stuffing in an explosive, which they call the taco. So it might seem like a tenuous connection, but in Mexico City in the early 20th century, there
In a
was
quarter mile, turn right onto Four Seasons Boulevard.
a taco called tacos de minero, a miner's taco, and some other variations, tacos de canasta, tacos from a basket, or tacos sudados, sweaty or steamed tacos.
Turn right onto Four Seasons Boulevard, then turn left onto Cheltenham Boulevard.
Cheltenham.
And that kind of draws the line, I think, pretty clearly.
Yeah, and all three of those were basically different names for the same preparation, where
Yeah.
when you fried them and then you stacked them all together, you would cover them with like a little like napkin or something like that in the basket to allow them to steam themselves to finish, right? And to me, that's where the word taco comes from, not from the food wrapped in the tortilla, but from that kind of
Take the next left onto Cheltenham Boulevard.
food wrapped up in that cloth napkin
Yeah.
in the same way that they were wrapping explosive in cloth and stuffing it in there. That to me is the core
Continue on Cheltenham Boulevard for half a mile.
relation rather than the food. The fact that it was in a basket wrapped up in fabric.
Yeah, and food wrapped up in a tortilla.
Sure, I mean I get it. It's they're both possible. I'm just putting my own hypothesis out there now. Okay, everybody.
You're like, it's not the tortilla, it's the napkin.
That's honestly, it makes sense to me when we're talking about explosive plugs wrapped in fabric. You know what I mean?
We
How
just
about
come down this way.
explosive, delicious food.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, and I totally understand that they could have been
Have
like,
a day
there's
drive.
a bomb in one hand and a food bomb in the other hand.
In a
So,
quarter mile, turn left onto Cheltenham Court.
I get it.
Taco in print, talking about a taco as food,
Yeah.
I believe for the first time was in 1891 in a novel called Los Bandidos de Rio Frio, The Bandits of Cold River. And there's a line in that book where they're talking about a celebration of
Take the next left onto Cheltenham Court, then your destination will be on the right.
Mexico City, and they say chito, which is fried goat with tortillas, and the children skipping with tacos and tortillas and avocado in their hand.
Sounds
Oh,
great.
yeah.
What an idyllic little bucolic scene that is.
I wish I was there.
We're not.
Yeah. Anywhere there's fried goat being served,
In 1,000 feet, turn right onto Cheltenham Boulevard.
I wish I was there.
No, I'm not done with the goat, but sure. I'm with you.
So it seems to be okay. We've got taco as a food. It's appearing in print by 1891 at the
Feels like they're
at
doing
the
the tree
latest.
work. Full circle.
Everything I just
Means that if you
Yeah.
write something down, this is basically true across history, as we've
Oh,
seen in
okay.
episode after episode. If you write something down and you don't explain it,
It's a hand
that means
gesture.
to people coming 100 or so
Ring
years
the-
later,
does
looking
it
back
ring the
at this,
bell?
Take
Yeah.
the next right onto Cheltenham Boulevard.
Well, that is what they
that
were
means that
moving,
this
so
has been
hopefully
around and everybody already knows what
they,
this is. I'm just referring to something that everybody's familiar with. It's not a new
they're away
invention.
here.
So somewhere between the time that people were creating these
In 600 feet, turn left onto Cheltenham Court.
taco plugs in the silver mines in the middle of the 19th century, maybe late 19th century, in 1891,
Yeah, he's coming out.
tacos
Take the next left onto Cheltenham Court, then your destination will be on the right.
became a thing. They were invented somewhere in there.
Yeah, and I mean, it
Going
was
out, sir.
in an actual Mexican dictionary in 1895, defined as taco as the food and Mexico City as its birthplace.
Yeah, it seems like Mexico City was ground zero for this place, and that they believed that by the turn of the 20th century, Mexico City was starting to
looking
become
forward
a
to
bustling
2005.
metropolis again.
7.
Your destination is on the right.
Do tell.
So apparently,
Handed to customer.
What was it?
They added the following instructions. Ring the bell.
by 1910, Mexico City had
Don't
become
think
like a,
that's
a
to the
huge,
houses.
huge town of a people
do a
of a
fancy
population
door.
of about 500,000
Yeah.
people, which is pretty
Oh yeah, the
significant.
one door's
Right.
fake. See,
This is
That's that door now.
1910
Yeah.
when this happened. If you went back to 15,
Don't
about
forget the Pepsi.
1500, say about 400 years earlier,
I won't.
right before contact with the Europeans, the same city, Tenochtitlan, which Mexico City was built on, but the Aztec city that was there before, had about 400,000 people, just under 500,000. Isn't that nuts?
Yeah, I mean, you would think that by 1910 they would have over 1 million.
Right, but they wouldn't, and one reason why is because the population took a nosedive, both between conquest of the Spanish and the violence that broke out from that, but also even worse from the smallpox that the Spanish brought with them, which wiped out 40% of the population of Tenochtitlan in 1 year. the year after contact, 40% of the city died from smallpox.
Jeez. That's
So it took that long to rebound, all the way up to 1910. It finally surpassed its pre-contact population.
So 1910, things are cooking, literally, in Mexico City. And a lot of people from, more rural Mexico had moved there to get work, to work in the factories, and they were living in, small tenements, basically. And they didn't have these big full kitchens, usually, to work with. So this is where the street taco, or the taquerias, really started to pop up, where you would go outside for dinner, and you would go down to the street and find these delicious, mouth-watering taquerias. And they were bringing in influences from every corner of Mexico, because, Mexico's a huge country, just like, the United States has, and every country has, like, regional food specialties. Same is true in Mexico, and all of these different flavors were coming into central Mexico City and exploding onto the food scene there.
Yes. I mean, the varied and various cuisines that are brought by different peoples is not the least reason why multiculturalism is a great thing,
Agreed.
And Mexico City is a melting pot at the beginning of the 20th century. I mean, all these people were bringing it, and not just from Mexico or every part of Mexico, but there were some influences like outside of Mexico too, like Tacos El Pastor, right? The one you mentioned earlier that you got kind of a deconstructed version of today.
Yeah, with that pineapple flavor, and that one I think has a pretty interesting story, which I never knew. It was it originated in Lebanon, in specifically in the Mexican state of Puebla. We have these, I feel like I'm living in Mexico right now.
After those tacos you had, I can imagine why.
Had these Lebanese immigrants settling there in the early 20th century, and they started selling their gyros, and they had those lambs on the vertical spit, like they still have today, and they were cutting off strips of it, putting it on a pita, sometimes a flour tortilla. And in Pueblo, there were and still are known as tacos Arabes, which is Arab, like Arab tacos. And the Mexicans there said, hey, they're really onto something here with this vertical spit, but let's throw a adobo pork butt up there instead.
And throw a little grilled pineapple on there as well. And you have what we recognize as Tacos El Pastor, which means shepherd's tacos, which is a reference to the Bedouin roots of the Lebanese immigrants who came over.
Great story.
It is a great story. And actually, Chuck, that reminds me of another story. I was boasting about how I love all food. There's actually one of the few things I've ever sent back in my life.
Oh, no.
Was at a Lebanese restaurant in Toledo called the Beirut. Which may still be there. And
a little on the nose, but sure.
And my family was feeling pretty adventurous and ordered a bunch of stuff off the menu. And one of the things we ordered, it didn't really sink in what we were ordering, but they brought out a full-size bunt cakes, bunt pans worth of raw ground meat covered in raw egg.
Oh my gosh.
And it was just on this big plate, and it was like, dig in, and we were just like, we can't. We can't. And I still to this day feel bad about wasting that meat.
Do you know what it was? Like, what that dish is?
I don't remember what it's called.
Someone will let us know.
I sure. And I think it was, I don't think it was like an invention of that restaurant's owners or the cook, or the chef, I should say. But I haven't seen it very frequently since then. But it was, we're like, no, I'm not going to do that one.
Well, I mean, hats off to your family in the 1980s in Toledo for going to a Lebanese restaurant. We had Chinese food, and that was about as crazy as we got.
Oh, we got fancy. Not only did we go to the Beirut once in a while, we also sometimes went to En Japanese Steakhouse, which is a hibachi steakhouse. So we got real ethnic sometimes.
Yeah, that stuff we couldn't afford that. I'm not like you were rich or anything, but we ate a lot at home, so we didn't even go out that much. So when we did, it was pretty conservative. But it wasn't until my 20s till I left home and got into college that I really started exploring foods of the world.
Yeah, well, good for you for doing that. Some people never do, especially if they were raised without being exposed to it. So it's good that you did.
What's so great about multiculturalism? Food.
The food.
Beautiful babies.
Yeah, beautiful babies, for sure. Plenty of stuff, different points of view, all sorts of great.
But really food.
Sure. So, you want to take another break and then get back to tacos? continuing on because we finally reached the point where we're like, okay, tacos now exist, but they're pretty much being slung out of food carts in Mexico City right now at the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah, we're gonna take a trip to Los Angeles,
What's going on right here?
right after this.
R.A.
Whatever.
Peacock streaming the biggest sporting event, the original and the latest movie.
He was not happy about their message.
2022 Winter Olympics and the Peacock original Bel Air, plus the new movie Marry Me, in theaters and streaming Valentine's Day. Sign up now at peacocktv.com.
Wanna learn about a pterosaur and call it pterodactyl? How to take a perfect poop and all about fractals. Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun, the Lizzie Borden murders and the cannibal run. Don't explain everything to your brain explodes. It's Chuck and Josh. It's stuff you should know. Word up, Jerry.
All right, smoggy, kind of already overcrowded, gross Los Angeles in the 1940s and 50s was a very segregated place. There were plenty of Mexican residents. There were plenty of
He was not in the proper
Black
lane.
Americans. There were plenty of Asian
But then
residents.
he was
There were
over
plenty
there.
of
Then,
people. It was a
okay.
melting pot, but they tended
You
to.
guys just have an off
There was a
day, I
white
guess.
flight that happened, and they tended to live
There is a
apart
Chick-fil-A.
by the 1940s.
Chick-fil-A.
Sort of
Oh, you did go to
suburbs in the
Chick-fil-A?
valley.
Yeah.
Orange County maybe is where a lot of white people fled to, and not entirely. But if you wanted to live inside Los Angeles, like maybe East Los Angeles, you may have been from Mexico originally.
Yeah, like Cheech Marin.
Yeah, born in East LA.
Yeah, that's right. Man, what a great song that was. So, so Jeffrey Pilcher, Senior Pilcher, he thought to look around at the, I think he got his hands on some phone books from Los Angeles in the 40s and 50s and started looking up taco joints. Because remember, at the behest of one Dave Ruse, who would become a Stuff You Should Know legendary writer, Jeffrey Pilcher's on this quest now to figure out how we got to the Americanized version of tacos. So he's tracing it from Mexico City up to California, as one would do, and he did that by looking at the phone book. And what he found is that outside
Yes,
of
navigate us
East
to the,
LA, you
or
could
what do you
find
think?
plenty of
Do we get
restaurants
the
that were
highway and go
taco
up or no?
but in East LA, there
Is
were
it-
only two
it's
restaurants
Winston-Salem, I want to get right,
in the
not
phone book
Burlington.
that had the name taco in
Yeah.
them, which would suggest, Chuck, that they
Steak
didn't
and
eat
Shake
tacos
over there
in
is
like
the,
in
hotspot.
authentic
Yeah.
Mexican American neighborhoods, but that's
Yeah,
not
we can head that
necessarily the
way.
case.
Yeah, I think what has been surmised, and I
Slight right onto the I-40 West ramp.
fully agree, is that there were plenty of places in East LA serving tacos. They just
In a
didn't
quarter mile, merge onto I-40 West.
feel the need to advertise it as a taco place to make it, it was sort of, if you were a white American or a black American in the 1940s and 50s in LA, Mexican food might have seemed exotic and maybe a little dangerous to try. Like dangerous for your stomach, that is.
Right.
So tacos was a safe sell, essentially, is what has been speculated. Like to put taco on a sign, people are like, oh, well, I've heard of tacos, I can try this place out.
Right. And so Pilcher came up with some pretty great names that he found in the predominantly white, predominantly black neighborhoods in LA that had taco in the name. Apparently the first one in Los Angeles that catered to non-Mexican customers was called Taco House. And that opened up in the early 40s. It's a pretty legit name, especially if you're saying, hey, American people,
In 2 miles, take exit 214 for Wendover Avenue.
particularly white people and black people, Taco House. That seems approachable, right? You're not afraid of that. Come eat here. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
They didn't even say Taco Casa.
No, that would be, well, no. That would have blown the minds back in the early 40s.
I like any restaurant with town at the end, so Ernie's Taco Town kind of speaks to me.
Yeah. How about Alice and Bert's places?
Bert's Taco Junction,
Yeah.
that's good. I wonder if it was an old train caboose.
Yeah, Alice's Taco Terrace, which is fine.
Yeah.
Frank's Taco Inn, that's a good one. I've never gotten why you would call a restaurant an inn, because typically you sleep at an inn, you know?
Yeah, I've never gotten that, because we had Village Inn Pizza,
Mm-hmm.
and I never got it. I tried to sleep there and it never worked.
Yeah, I'm so full.
And then in Watts, which is a predominantly, or historically at least, black neighborhood, you had Taco Kid and Taco the Town.
That's a great one. I love Taco the Town is not around anymore.
Oh, that's sad.
But apparently there is a Taco the Town in Maine. I believe.
Oh man, Maine tacos. I bet you even Maine has some good tacos here.
In half a mile, take exit 214 for Wendover Avenue.
For sure.
That would be the least likely state. I would say like Maine and Alaska.
Right. So we've gotten to the point where now there's tacos in Los Angeles, right? They've crept up. People are starting to create them
Take exit 214.
and cater to non-Mexican and non-Central American palates. And a lot of people say, okay,
In a quarter mile, use any lane to turn left onto West Wendover Avenue West.
well, it was actually Glenn Bell, the guy who founded
Use any lane to turn left onto West Wendover Avenue West.
Taco Bell. Which, did you know that there was a person with the last name of Bell that founded Taco Bell?
No, I didn't.
I didn't either. It's insane. Like my whole worldview's changed.
Like Jimmy Hutt's pizza chain.
Right. I've got one for you, Chuck. Did you know that the very first Pizza Hut was in Wichita, Kansas?
Really?
Yeah. And
Oh,
the
wow.
very first KFC, guess what city that was in?
Oh, please tell me it's Kentucky somewhere.
No.
Where?
Salt Lake City, Utah.
What?
Yeah, it's true.
Wow.
The Colonel really was from Kentucky,
Okay.
but the first Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant was opened in Salt Lake.
Salt Lake City. Huh.
I
who
think
knew?
it's one of those things where it's like, if you open a thing based on a regional cuisine, the one place it's not going to do well is in the actual region that cuisine comes from.
Well, they don't have Taco Bells in Mexico.
No, we'll talk about that later. We'll taco that later.
Okay.
All right, so
Sleepy.
again, Senor
There's
Pilcher,
some Red Bull.
I got to read this book. It sounds fantastic. He talks about the fact that if you were a Mexican immigrant and you were building a restaurant scene in the United States and you wanted to appeal to the Americans there, then you might want to like source ingredients that you're probably not throwing tripe their way right out of the barrel, you know. It's like you might want to look at
Step
the
Love tripe.
ingredients that are readily available, that people
You know
like,
what it is?
and like ground beef is one of them. So that ground
No.
beef as a
Yes.
central ingredient to those American tacos was really early on.
Dude, I can't tell you
No.
how late it was in life before
Yeah,
I
it's a type of
even
meat.
had a chicken taco, for Pete's sake.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Tell
It
me.
was all
Same.
ground beef. It was like, that's
Mhm.
all there was,
What animal
you know? Even if you went to a
Usually
Mexican
beef.
restaurant that was
Yeah.
not really a Mexican restaurant, like we used to go to Chi-Chi's.
Yeah, ground beef.
Ground beef in everything. It was just ground beef. And actually, that reminds me, Chuck, I turned up, there's this 1998 Onion article that I remember from like 1998. It made that much of an impression on me.
Yeah, what's the headline?
Taco Bell's 5 ingredients used in completely new way. And the article talked about how you've never had anything like this.
Right.
This one, the beef is on top of the beans, which is on top of the cheese.
In a quarter mile, use the second from the left lane to turn left onto Stanley Road.
It is funny how they do that still.
Yeah,
You know,
That's the
just
way.
make these crazy combinations
Right.
of the same thing.
right. But the upshot of all this is that a lot of people lay or credit
What's the hot spot?
Glenn Bell with inventing the Americanized taco, and that's not necessarily the case. It was some of these Mexican American immigrants who were creating
Use the second from the left lane to turn left onto Stanley Road, then turn right onto
Well,
Landry.
we're
these
getting
tacos
orders now, I guess.
to cater to
Yeah.
American tastes, but then also based, like you were saying, on stuff that was easily obtained, cheap, because everybody knows restaurant margins are so thick, and
Yeah.
it's incomprehensible why anyone opens a restaurant if you're just trying to make money.
Right.
And when you put all that together, people were making what you and I at age 10 would have recognized as a taco before Glenn Bell came along and started making tacos himself.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, well, Glenn Bell at the very least invented the technology where you could fry up these corn tortillas into these perfectly little shaped taco shells. And he kind of did. It seems like it was one of the cases where a few different people all sort of had the same idea within a few years of one another. without even stealing from each other.
Yeah.
Because there was a man in 1949 in Arizona named Joseph Pampa
Salam, please,
who filed an application for a deep fryer basket that made these perfect little taco shells. But a couple years before them, there was another restaurateur named